Salutations, respected viewers. So this is my video about Theresa May and Brexit. Well, she's done it. She's survived, as I forecast that she would. I don't know of a single pundit who said that she wouldn't make it. She fought off the leadership challenge. So a few days ago, the 48 signatures had been given to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee. The 1922 committee takes its name from the year when it was founded, and it's for backbench Conservative members of Parliament, as in not Conservative ministers or shadow ministers when the party's in opposition, not whips, for these Tory backwoodsmen, because it was founded in the year when the ordinary Conservative MPs, they said, we're having enough of this coalition, a Liberal leader, Lloyd George, Prime Minister, a remaining Conservative government. But anyway, so Jacob Rees-Mogg, the European Research Group, those are the hardline Brexiteers. They were deeply dissatisfied with the withdrawal agreement that May was proposing, and so they managed to force this leadership vote. But it's perhaps unwise for them because it's going to go off half-cocked. And having won it, she cannot be subjected to another challenge for 12 months, and she would be more vulnerable in a few weeks than she is now. So I predicted that there would be 60 votes cast against her. In fact, there were 117, whereas there were 200 for her. So she won. However, 37% of her own members of Parliament wanted to get rid of her as leader of the Conservative Party, which would obviously mean she would be got rid of as Prime Minister as well. The Conservatives would have to pick another leader, ideally pronto, and replace her. Now, it can take up to 2 months to do that, but I suspect as the party's in government and the clock is ticking on Brexit, they would do it quicker. So that's that. So the May has actually steadied the ship of state. Now this is out of the way. Her leadership is not an issue in the short term. She previously said that she would lead the Conservative and Unionist Party into the next election, which is scheduled for 2022, 3.5 years away. But now she said she will no longer do so. So she's already been in office for, 2.5 years. So she might be halfway through her time, I suspect rather less than that. The United Kingdom is due to quit the European Union on the 29th of March, barring a sudden change of heart, and I think there actually will be one. But anyway, I suspect she won't remain as Prime Minister much longer after that. Okay, so who voted for her? Well, they're the moderate Brexiteers voted for her. Some of these are convert Brexiteers who campaigned for Remain. That's most of her cabinet, but accepted the result in the referendum, said we've got to do Brexit, and we'll go along with the withdrawal agreement. Now, a few of the extremist Remainers don't like her either. People like Anna Soubry said, let's just scrap this whole thing, have another referendum, or whatever. So that is that. But it seems like at the 11th hour, the United Kingdom might change its mind. And the ultra-Remainers have been thrown a lifeline by the European Court of Justice, which ruled a few days ago the United Kingdom can unilaterally cancel Brexit. Remember, May sent a letter to the European Union on the 29th of March 2017 saying that the United Kingdom is going to leave the European Union, and that gave the UK 24 months to leave. Nowadays, now the court has announced, the United Kingdom can suddenly say, actually, change our mind, we want to stay in. And the UK must be accepted on the current terms. Because one of the Brexiteer arguments was, well, we can't change our mind because the European Union said, well, we will allow you to stay, but only if you pay a lot more, or you accept this law, or you scrap the pound, join the euro, or set various conditions. And no, they can't do that. So Remainers say, oh, well, let's stay on these relatively advantageous terms. Now, if the United Kingdom has a sort of deathbed conversion, as it were, to the EU, and I think it's going to happen, then the EU would rejoice, because there's been great upheaval for 2.5 years. They really haven't liked it. Obviously, it's hit the pound, it's hit the euro as well, have all sorts of headaches. They're worried that obviously Brexit might be a rip-roaring success. I think it will be a success if we do it, but not a tremendous one, not in the short term. But what petrifies them is that more member states saying, what on earth are we in the EU for? Why are we footing the bill? But if the United Kingdom decides to remain after all, then I think the European Union will immediately reformulate the Treaty of Lisbon and get rid of that article which permits member states to withdraw from the European Union. So May doesn't have much of a future. She was handed a bit of a poison chalice, but she chose to take it when David Cameron resigned in June 2016. She was a Remainer. Remember, she's a sort of a convert Brexiteer. She was asked in the last election campaign, "Do you believe in Brexit?" several times, and she wouldn't give a straight answer. She simply said, "I will carry out the will of the people." So the subtext is obviously that she still thinks that Brexit is a bad idea, but she's duty bound to do it. She was in a bit of a bind at this election in May 2017. It seemed like an inspired choice. The poll ratings were just incomparably favourable. It wasn't going to get better than this. Corbyn was in the doldrums. Labour was tearing itself apart. The Liberal Democrat pollings were abysmal. Her personal approval rating was sky high, and that's why that was made the centrepiece of the campaign, her as an individual, because despite being Prime Minister, she's a retiring person. She's a deeply serious, policy-minded person, not affable, not really an extrovert. But because she was so popular, she decided to go for it, and she managed to almost snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, turning a 24% lead into a 2% lead, and becoming a minority government only propped up by the Democratic Unionist Party with a confidence and supply agreement, which made exiting the European Union even trickier than it was already going to be, because people wanted to have the cake and eat it. The DUP wanted to leave the European Union, but not have any physical barriers on the border of the Republic of Ireland, or any tricky situation in relation to trade. Well, it's very difficult to have both. Anyway, so this withdrawal agreement is not very appealing. I'm someone who reluctantly thinks the UK should vote for it, should go for it. There's the backstop, and yes, I have a problem about that. I dislike the way the United Kingdom might be trapped in that permanently, but I'm worried if the UK doesn't go for it, it might be stuck in the EU forever. There are other issues. So there've been opinion polls. Were a referendum held now, 54% would vote to remain, 28% would vote to leave without an agreement, and the remainder would vote to accept this withdrawal agreement. So the withdrawal agreement is quite unpopular. So it shows the Remain 4 percentage points ahead of the Leavers put together. Bear in mind, Leave was on 52% in the polls. Sorry, Remain was on 52% of the polls the day of the actual referendum. In fact, they got 48%. It was wrong. It was 4% out in that sense. So it could be 4% out again, in which case it would be 50-50. So just one vote might decide it. Now, pollsters can obviously only report what they're told. Some people lie to them. Some people don't respond, but do actually vote. Some people say they're going to vote this way or that, but don't bother to vote. So that's why. It's not an exact science. There is a margin of error, and the polls were maybe just outside the margin of error last time. Some people can't be reached, don't have a mobile phone, things like that, particularly the elderly, and who are more likely to vote. So that was that. So if there was Remain, if the referendum was held again, I suspect Remain would narrowly make it, and for them that would be it, be settled for all time. So May survive, but I don't think Brexit will, for reasons I've adumbrated elsewhere. Nobody thinks it's a wonderful agreement or deeply impressive, but the European Union were not going to make it terribly alluring. However, if the European Union really cared about us in the Republic of Ireland, they would make it attractive for the United Kingdom to sign. Therefore, there would be no ructions in Hibernia, and people could trade without a letter hindrance across the frontier, things like that. There would be no recrudescence of the conflict. Of course, there's never the least excuse for the conflict in the north of Ireland for loyalist or Republican terrorism, but we mustn't play into the hands of those who like to drag us back to the dark days of conflict. So Theresa May, she's made valiant efforts in a difficult situation. She was adroit as Home Secretary, and who gets through so many years as a Home Secretary relatively unscathed? I remember Michael Howard, Conservative Home Secretary under John Major, and he said, you know, a storm can come out of a clear blue sky. However, the Windrush scandal started under May, this hostile environment idea. In which sense, it's a good idea to make it difficult for illegal immigrants to reside in the United Kingdom. However, that caught up some innocent people, some people who were legal permanent residents and indeed British citizens, and then went on to Amber Rudd. So the other people will be jockeying for position. May has immediately undermined herself by saying she's going to stand down quite soon. So 63% of Conservative MPs voted to keep her. Some of them will have done so through gritted teeth. They reluctantly voted for her because you don't change horses midstream. They don't want to queer the pitch for Brexit even more than is already the case. Or if they want to suddenly stay within the European Union, they think they have a better shot at doing that with her than switching to somebody else. For them, God forbid that Boris Johnson should become Prime Minister, who wants a hard Brexit, or Jacob Rees-Mogg, not that I think that's likely, but these are better known and more charismatic. there's some of the bland people on the other side who would be withdrawal agreement or even go back to Remain, like Amber Rudd, Sajid Javid, Philip Hammond, all of whom campaigned for Remain. Just trying to think of the other possibilities. Justine Greening, Ruth Davidson, who's in the Scottish Parliament, she's not an MP, who campaigned for Remain, and on and on. So the knives will be out. So Bojo's got name recognition. He's a branded himself, but he's rather blotted his copybook, and a lot of Conservative MPs don't like him. They recognise him for the glory boy he is, the egomaniac, a sort of an intellectual Trump. So I think soon after 29th of May, she may well resign, just had enough of it. She's been an embattled Prime Minister for the last couple of years, and not much has gone right for her. The economy is growing slowly, but things like the NHS is having trouble. There's been a spike in crime. Austerity is being eased off, not very successfully. The pound is falling quite low. I know to fall a bit is all right, but perhaps a bit too low. So the few achievements the government has had, people have not paid a great deal of attention to those because Brexit has just taken up so much time and so much of what the media is reporting. So that's that. She may still fail to get the withdrawal agreement passed. Then what happens is the default setting leaving without agreement. I suppose it is. Parliament doesn't have to vote for that, but they might try and insist on a meaningful vote. There could be a vote of no confidence. Some of her own party might vote against her. Even that dozen or so extremist Remain MPs to force an election in which the Labour and the Liberal Democrats would go into it promising a referendum again. There might be a new Conservative leader by that point and a Prime Minister who might do the same. So we've got to sort this out. Have three options possibly. Do we remain? Do we leave with the withdrawal agreement, or do we leave without a withdrawal agreement? That's that. So I suspect the Remainers will actually get their way. The SNP will be against it. May well be a Labour government again under Corbyn or not, but have to have either coalition with the Lib Dems or confidence and supply with them, or confidence and supply with the SNP. So Corbyn, he's a reluctant Brexiteer supposedly. Now, because of the referendum result, he might be pushed back the other way. Remember, 9 out of 10 Labour MPs are Remainers. He's fairly unpopular anyway. Most of his parliamentary party tried to boot him out a couple of years ago. So he might be forced to go along with this. The Lib Dems will probably come up because remember they're at rock bottom at the last general election. In terms of share of the vote, it was lower at that time than the time before. It was their worst result in terms of percentage of the vote for 50 years. So there's only one way it can go. It's only going to go up. So that's that. Brexit's not going to happen, unfortunately.